As of 9:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time yesterday, March 1st, 2021, we now have access to patch version 4.3.1. It's mostly, by the admission of the developer Glava, a series of bug fixes and minor changes, but I'm going to go over each one so that you understand what they are and the context and why they're useful now. So first, the hotkey window has been reworked and Control and Shift hotkeys can now be rebound. There were individuals who were asking for this because they are either left-handed or they have some other aspect of their keyboard that they would rather not work, and they're familiar with this from other games. Control and Shift specifically would cause problems, such as activating sticky keys if Shift were pressed too many times, or interacting with other aspects of the browser if Control were pressed, so this removal will be a boon to those players. Players searching for a ranked game now so as searching in the lobby. This is to encourage the growth of people playing in the ranked match mode. Previously, when people were in ranked, all it said was ranked. You didn't know if those individuals were in a game or not. And while they were in the process of searching, there was no change in their status whatsoever. Now that searching is shown in the lobby whenever a person is looking for a ranked game, you can queue up knowing roughly how many people will be also queuing up at the same time. An editor bug where values could not be set to 0 has been resolved. Some of the default units, such as the snake, and more specifically the mana for units such as the mage, could not have their values set to 0. Many modders and map creators got around this by creating a clone of an existing item and then modifying its values appropriately. However, the fact that this bug has now been addressed might ease some of the pressure on the modders and map makers to have that hidden knowledge and to use instead more familiar and understandable tactics. Personal text can now be set to empty. Whenever you go inside of your personal text for your account, you can have that to say whatever you would like it to say. Previously, it could not be set to nothing. Now it can. Map loading screens now show the correct map name and image. This is an error that only showed up in a couple of very specific instances, but more generally, it was making it difficult for people to know what game they were loading into, particularly if an individual was coming out of the editor or out of another game or was out of the spectator of a previous game. Now this error shouldn't manifest as often or at all. Fixed a bug where ladder games could record the wrong result. Obviously, when people are playing ranked, it would be of a detriment to the state of ranked and to their encouragement and desire to play ranked if the result actually is counter to what happened. If an individual loses a game that they should have won, or even if their screen says that they have won but then they lose the points as if it were a defeat, all of these things negatively impact the experience and decrease the likelihood that other people will push into the ranked match mode. And so its correction is a bit appreciated. Windows no longer show up behind the game lobby. There was an error that existed where if you were leaving a game and an individual started to message you, their screen would pop up, but it would appear behind the UI or user interface elements of the main lobby. This additionally would persist. It wouldn't be quite as noticeable in the main lobby, but it would be very noticeable in the game lobby. Whereas there is more black and fewer divisions of the same color blue, therefore there would be a jarring contrast where you would have a window that would be unable to be closed in the background. The fact that this no longer shows up is more a user interface tweaking that makes everything 1A work as they're supposed to inside a little wargame. Leaving a clan now requires confirmation. As with most items in user experience that require confirmation, this is to make sure that nobody doesn't accidentally jerk their hand and press the wrong button, or to give them a second consideration. Perhaps they're testing out the buttons and don't know what they do, but if they click leave clan previously, they're gone. Now if they attempt to leave the clan, there will be an attempt to confirm whether or not the user wants to do that, which means the user has to accept that they are doing this voluntarily and on purpose a second time. Various issues caused by cookie conflicts have been resolved. These errors are innumerable, they're almost uncountable in how many of them there were, but they tend to be small, not any that I'm particularly aware of, but the fact that they have been resolved helps, especially since this is a browser game. The use of cookies is, from a technical standpoint, extremely important. Is undead and is human can now be used in target requirements in the editor. This is an actual boon, and massive boon at that, to the people who take the most effort inside of Little Wargame to pursue the modding or map creating side of the game. These people who are in modding or map creating or making new maps would frequently try to have autocast conditions or abilities that are only allowed to activate against certain types. Previously, they could target on whether or not something was biological, but they couldn't target on whether or is mechanical, but they could not target on is undead or is human, which means that there are some abilities that scope only allows for 2 to the 1 or 2 possibilities for. Now that that has been extended to 2 to the 3rd or possibly 2 to the 4th, we're looking at more and more complexity that can be brought to bear inside of the editor. This is also part of the ongoing work to make sure that the editor doesn't have possibilities that then can't be performed for whatever reason. That is to say, everything that's in the editor that the map creator and the modder believe should be able to be done and they have correctly executed will now continue to work the way that it should, and adding is undead and is human as items for target requirements merely adds to that. Teleporting a unit just as it dies no longer leaves a permanent vision circle. This was an issue that was actually impacting ranked quite severely, although not to the point that I'm aware of any players who made their units that were going to die teleport as they're dying on purpose. Merely, it just was as it said. Teleporting a unit just as it dies, in this case usually a raider, no longer leaves behind a permanent vision circle, because that is what it would do. It will leave behind a permanent patch of vision that there was no way to erase or to remove. And so this is a bug that impedes on the integrity of melee maps, and also may become a larger concern for maps that make more use of teleporting than the single raider of teleport ability that is in the base game currently. Username and password autofill no longer show up in lobby chat. This, in fact, was a massive pain for people who like to save their username and passwords, as every time they would click on the enter text in the main lobby chat, they would see, of course, username and password autofill. Perhaps you don't want your password going out there into the wide world unsecured, and perhaps you actually just want to type words. But because it would bring down the autofill, there was increased possibility that you would hit enter and enter that instead, or that the words that you would type would go to different passwords that you have saved. The fact that that is no longer happening is not really a giant fix in the sense that it hugely impedes on the difficulty of everyone to play and participate in the little wargame, but it does mean that there is an extra layer of frustration that has been removed from something that should be quite painless, and that is the chat interaction. Maps are no longer automatically marked as unlocked on load. This is a huge boon once again to the map making and modding community, as there are many reasons why you may want to lock a map. Perhaps you have just figured out some new tech or some new strat or some new way of making things work on a mechanical level inside the little wargame editor. Perhaps the project that you're working on is meant to be secret. It is going to be a large project that other people can take part in, but you don't want everyone to necessarily know what's going on behind the scenes in terms of copying the map, or in terms of copying its data, or in terms of copying, most commonly, the sprites and graphics that are associated with it. Keep in mind that we also have some maps that have been created by people such as JY that explicitly are puzzle maps, and allowing them to be unlocked in an unnatural way allows all users to figure out what the solution is in a way that would be detrimental to the entire purpose of those mods. Custom AIs can be loaded again. This is excellent news for the map-making and modding community, but specifically this is excellent news for Brutality Warlord. Brutality Warlord has actually created a custom AI that works on 2 of their maps because they were waiting on this exact thing to occur and to happen. This is also the reason why the AI or bot discussion channel was never removed from creative in the Discord, even though it was a known error that AIs could not be appropriately loaded. Now that they can be appropriately loaded, it took Brutality Warlord less than 12 hours to highlight all of the work that they had been putting into their own AI for 2 maps of their own, and I suspect that this will be a friendly encouragement for other people to go ahead and make more of their own AI, as they won't be stopped up by the ultimate technical difficulty of it simply not running. And then finally, skins are now saved in replays, and replays with dances no longer desync. Both of these were actually massive, massive problems, in that skins are now saved in replays. It's mostly cosmetic, but perhaps you'd like to see what skins this player uses. Perhaps it gives a good sense of vision. If you have 2 soldiers, one person has a skin and another person doesn't, or they have 2 different skins, having the skins actually makes it easier to determine what units are on whose team, and it gives some flair and some interest and some pizzazz to the matchup, especially as we may see more emotes, more skins, and more customized units and buildings of this type coming up in the future. The issue with replays with dances no longer desyncing is massive, because many people, when they lose a game, want to look at a replay, or if they want to highlight that something amazing happened, perhaps in a melee game, or in a mod, or they're looking for advice, or they want to make content All of these things require replays, and the problem with replays, of course, is that if dance causes a desync, then that means that individuals aren't actually getting all of the content that they're trying to make, and the replays aren't working in a way that they're seemingly not supposed to. They're breaking in odd places. So credit to Glava, AC, and Silverboss, and anyone else who helped with development, anyone who reported any of these bugs as well. This doesn't have a lot in terms of new features, but the importance of patch version 4.3.1 is that it's a series of bug fixes, and is that it's a series of minor changes. A famous quote made by sages says as follows: if a gnat tore at a sage every day, even they would lose their patience. And much in the same way, the correction of bugs and minor fixes and minor changes such as this that tend to be quality of life improvements are all things that are to the direct benefit of every little wargame player, whether they've run into these issues previously or not.